you're good whenever?
Well, you know, if you say bad boys anywhere in America where they follow basketball, everybody knows who you're talking about. But if you say bad boys in the state of Michigan, I mean, there's emotion from everybody that identifies with that team. They were not just one of the most popular Piston teams of all time. They're one of the most popular teams ever in the state of Michigan. People could identify with the bad boys. I've said before that not everybody in Michigan has a blue-collar job, but everybody in Michigan has a blue-collar mentality because they know how important those daily jobs are to keep Michigan afloat. And so these guys were lunch pail guys, and they were tough. They were tough-minded. People could identify with them. They were Rust Belt guys. You know, they felt like they could be the guy next to you in the factory. They were real. If you cut them, they'd bleed. And everybody had a favorite, but nobody didn't love the bad boys. In terms of how the team was put together, it took a while. They got better throughout the 80s and finally won a championship in '89. But it had a lot to do with interjecting the right pieces into the puzzle. And Jack McCloskey, the general manager, did a great job of that. You know, he drafted Isaiah Thomas, and then he hired Chuck Daly to coach the team. And so you had, as it turned out, one of the all-time greatest players and one of the all-time greatest coaches already connected early in the decade. Soon after that, they made a trade to get Bill Laimbeer from Cleveland, and his role with the Pistons was much bigger than it was in Cleveland. He could make shots, he could make plays, he was a great competitor. He played 680-some straight games, showed up every night. And the only reason his streak was snapped was because he got suspended for a fight with Brad Daugherty of the Cavaliers. So Lamb might still be playing if that streak hadn't been snapped. And then they drafted Joe Dumars, drafted John Sally, drafted Dennis Rodman. And in that first draft with Isaiah Thomas, Kelly Tripucka came in, and he was a pivotal player for the Pistons early on. They eventually changed small forwards twice more. KT traded for Adrian Dantley. Adrian Dantley traded for Mark Aguirre. I contend they'd have won with any of those three guys, but Mark Aguirre in the end was a small forward here. And one reason I think it worked so well for Mark is he didn't really mind coming out of the game down the stretch. I don't think Kelly Tripucka or Adrian Dantley would have been as willing to come out. And the reason he came out was because Chuck Daly became so enamored with Dennis Rodman's defense that he wanted him in there with the game on the line. So, and you have to look at the power forward position. They were looking for a whole decade for a power forward, and finally they made a deal to get Rick Mahorn over here from Washington. And Ricky had better years statistically than he had with the Pistons, but what he did here you really couldn't quantify. He was a force. He added another layer of toughness that, you know, they call he and Bill Laimbeer the original bad boys, and they relished that. And so a great screen setter, a great rebounder. You know, you as a player would know that there are other things that don't show up sometimes in the scorebook that add up to winning basketball. So putting that team together throughout the 90s and finally getting in a real groove brought the Pistons to the cream of the crop in one of the greatest decades that any sport will ever have.
That was better than the first time. Okay, so in your profession, during that time especially, I'm really interested to know, like, were there other broadcasters, other people in your line of work that had things to say about the Bad Boys? Obviously, they got their name for a reason. You know, with players and with teams, they weren't the most liked team. Did you ever hear dialogue from other people not on the court? You know, people just having anything to say about them?
But I don't think they were the most popular guys with the local broadcasters in any other market, because I think, you know, the guys in Chicago felt they were too tough on Michael Jordan. The Cleveland broadcasters definitely thought they were too tough on Brad Daugherty and company and Mark Price down there, and they dished out a lot of punishment. And you know, there's a term that they didn't take any prisoners, and you could tell that they ruffled feathers everywhere they went, but they were absolutely loved here, and that's all that mattered. You could feel Bill Laimbeer took most of the venom himself, and he was almost happy to do it. And I think he helped the rest of the team, because people in most other markets, all those other arenas, they couldn't stand Bill Laimbeer. And in Chicago once, they sawed up a little cardboard cutout of Bill Laimbeer at halftime, and the fans went crazy. And he would, when the people would start booing, he'd just go like this to get it all out now. So he took a lot of the heat, and that, I don't think that's the easiest thing in the world to do. The other guys weren't terribly well liked either, but he took on the real persona of the Bad Boys and took most of the heat.
So going off that a little bit, what's one memory that you have that you would say is like the most Bad Boy? Like what whether it was, you know, Bill Laimbeer doing this, a fight during a game, during practice, anything. What do you think is one thing that you think about during that time and you're like, yeah, that's Bad Boys right there? Well,
the guys are coming out of the locker room, and in a big series, I think it was against the Bulls, and you know, as they got close to the court, a guy was standing right in front of him with a camera. Bill just bowled right over the guy, right through it, bam! Down he went, and the team came out. You know, they weren't concerned with what was going on with anybody else except their team and what they wanted to accomplish. And I also think what happened in Chicago, you know, the Michael Jordan throwdowns certainly showed what the Pistons felt was their place. They held Chicago back, and the Bulls finally had to kind of fight their way through the Pistons. They changed the rules a little bit to make it more difficult to be physical. And I think the commissioner's thinking to himself, hey, I got a guy here who everybody in the world wants to see play, and these guys from Detroit keep knocking him down. Maybe I need to do something about this. So that's one thing that happened. I don't think it was fair, but it happened. And you know, time marches on. The Pistons had trouble with the Boston Celtics in their time. They had to get past the Celtics, and that was a great rivalry. And I think in the end there was mutual respect there. I think the Detroit-Chicago rivalry, the blood was always boiling, and it really hadn't stopped to this day.
Yeah. That's funny. So you did talk about the rule change a little bit, and I mean, even more, the rules have changed till now.
Yeah.
Do you think that it would ever be possible for a team to try to like replicate that in this age, and especially just how defensive-minded they were? Do you think that would be possible at all, or?
You know, I think that what they're allowing today, and it's kind of strange, they allow you to do a lot of things in the paint and nearly nothing on the perimeter. So, which paves the way for the Steph Currys of the world to make those long, beautiful threes virtually unmolested. And yet it's hard for guys to score inside, which makes it less of a classic big man's league. And I'm hoping that they balance that out a little bit, because I think there should be a place for the big man in the league. We've had so many great players, you know, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the list goes on and on from there, that I still want to see those guys operate.
Okay, my last question. What is your favorite memory of the Bad Boys era? Their championship runs, anything off the court that you enjoyed just about the group, anything.
You know, I have a couple of favorite memories. Vinnie Johnson was a favorite of mine, and great guy. And by the way, he's a very successful businessman now. And not surprising, he's a sharp guy and knows how to get along with people. I'm sure he knows how to make deals and make everybody happy with the deals that he makes. But Vinny had been slumping a little bit before we played Portland in the 1990 finals, but Chuck Daly continued to go to him, and of course he hit the biggest shot, the jumper over Jerome Kersey, who was he's deceased now, but a 6'8" guy with a lot of length. Vinny hit that jumper over him with 0.7 of a second to play in the game. We call it the shot of 007. So I'm happy for Vinny in that way. I was happy to see Isaiah have the ball in his hands in '89 when the game ended. He was able to flip the ball up to the rafters, and I said Detroit's the city of champions again on the air. And you know, and Joe Dumars, who did a lot of dirty work himself, was the MVP of the '89 finals. I was happy that Isaiah was the MVP of the '90 finals. But I think one of the most emotional moments for me was when the Pistons finally beat the Boston Celtics to move on to the NBA Finals in 1988. And our owner, the late, great Bill Davidson, who built the Palace, was in an office in the locker room, and we were doing a post-game radio show from there. And so we're on the air, and I said, Mr. Davidson, did we just beat the Boston Celtics? Pinch me. And he pinched me on the hand, and I will never forget that. That was like, it almost brought tears to my eyes. I know how important it was to him. It was important to all of us.
That's awesome. Okay, well, that's all I have.
Well, you did a great job.
Well, thank you so much.
Are you going to go?